Hi, thanks for coming. My name is Joseph Griffiths, and I'm going to be talking very briefly, and I mean very briefly today, about how to operationalize IT with velocity. It's going to be a very short talk, so I'm going to talk about a couple quick concepts. There's some contact information for me if you have questions. Don't hesitate to ask, okay? So we got the disclaimer. Required to do that. So I want to tell a quick story as the introduction to my prescriptive examples on how to maintain velocity. When I was a kid, I loved to play video games. And a little 8-year-old playing my 8-bit video games, and my favorite game was Test Drive. And this game allowed you to drive high-performance sports cars on European roads and attempt to beat time in other cars. I used to drive this thing on my keyboard like you wouldn't believe. I would get that Ferrari or that car, and I'd love to drive on that road. Unfortunately, I had a consistent problem. My problem was I kept losing. And I kept losing because every time I came to a turn, I would either go off the road, crash into the other lane, or have to slow down so much that I couldn't make the turn, right? And my father's sitting behind me watching. And as any wise father says, he looks at me and he says, "Son, I know where your problem is. You're waiting until you're already in the turn to adjust direction. As a driver, I always start to do the turn long before I get into the turn." So this is really the secret to maintaining velocity in IT, because the business will change, the plans will change, things will change. And IT has to be able to make the turn and adjust for that turn long before they get into the middle of it. Because if we wait until the business tells us that it's happening and we need it 10 minutes from now, we'll have to slow down to 4 miles an hour or, well, crash right off the rails. I'm seeing both happen all the time. So I want to talk about a couple different things that are related to that. There's 3 things that I want to talk about. First one, I want to go through a need. I have a need to carry a single passenger between 2 locations. So what kind of car do I need? Well, we got the high performance choice. Give me a hand if you want the high performance car. Come on, who wants a yeah, that's right. Everybody in the room wants a high performance car. You know what I love about this car? This car is fast. It's custom built. It carries exactly 1 passenger. You know what I don't like about this car? It's custom built. It takes a long time to build. It's very expensive, right? So how about this car? Come on, give me a hand if you want this car. Okay, the guys in the back. Okay, the guys in the back want this car. Right, yeah, it's a great car, right? I mean, you know, it has a couple challenges. One advantage to this car is they're easy to make, they're very cost effective, and they still achieve my basic need, which is to get a consumer from one side to the other, right? There's a problem with it. They've got too many seats. I said 1 person, I didn't say 2, right? And they may not perform just as well as the high performance car. So, let me ask you the question, how does the business see these 2 different cars? One of them took too long, the other got it fast. They don't care. They really don't. Now, I'm not going to knock down the fact that there's some high-performance vehicle needs out there in our world. There are the databases and things like that exist that need to be the high-performance car, but most of our workloads are going to be the golf cart. Yet we, for some reason, start to treat them like the high-performance car. We over-engineer and we do too much to make the perfect vehicle instead of focusing on the thing that's most important, which is got it fast. So let me ask you some questions on this. How do we standardize our car? What can we do to standardize our car? And I'm taking the approach that you're going to deal with a brownfield environment. In other words, an environment that currently exists, and how are you going to try to make that standardized? I like this first point. Stay focused on the minimally viable product. Don't worry about everything that you can do. Focus on what you must do to be successful. I'm a big fan of configuration management tools. And if anybody wants this, I'll post this on my blog as well, by the way, all this deck. Focus on configuration management tools. That's a way you can take brownfield existing servers or cars. Notice I just did the transition, right? That's how you can take existing tools and start to put standards on them. One at a time, add standards until you get them standardized. Create secure mobile homes instead of castles. IT is built around the idea of building a really strong outer layer, and then maybe a really strong inner layer, and then another layer. And those are our firewalls, and we build it that way, right? Well, I gotta tell you, in the middle of a zombie attack, I'm pretty focused on the fact that as soon as the zombie gets in the first wall, I'm going down. Because now they're inside my house and I can't get out. The wall is actually stopping me from getting out. So I want a mobile home in a zombie attack, but I want a secure mobile home. So I'm going to put some extra reinforcement on it, maybe some spikes, and I'm going to be able to drive it from place A to place B. So we need to focus on putting security wrapping around the individual workloads, around our golf carts, instead of around our infrastructures, okay? And standards and lifecycle management, I think that's pretty obvious. All right, let's jump to the next point. Do you understand the journey? I spend a lot of my time in IT looking at the first picture here. What do I got to get done today? How am I going to get it done? And what does it look like, right? The second is more of a reality, because not only do I need to turn long before I get into the first turn, but it's helpful to know that I'm going to have to do a 180 turn in about 3 seconds later, because it's going to go like this and then like that, right? So we need to start to understand the business better, and there's still going to be some blank spots, just like this shows. There's some places I don't know what the road's going to do, but we can better understand it. And when we do that, we move from being reactive, because we're only dealing with what is here now, to being proactive to the things that are coming down the road. So let's talk about prescriptive advice for road mapping, right? Number one, how are you supposed to understand the journey? You can only understand the journey by understanding the business that you're associated with. I hate this, but read the 10K, listen to the earning calls, understand your business, understand what's important to your business, and how your efforts in IT change the customer's experience. That's a big deal. Everyone cares about how the customer feels and gets experience. Understand how your project affects revenue, understand how it affects the money of the business, and start to be able to quantify whatever you're talking about in the language of business, which is cost, money. You got to be able to quantify what you're doing and how much it costs. And then here's my favorite, the one that I don't like: talk, and most importantly, listen to people that are in development and business owners. Spend time with them. I want to be laser focused on building the car. But you know what? Long before I become laser focused about how to build the best car, I should probably spend a lot more time talking about what kind of car they need. It's a big deal. It can help us. All right, so last item I'm going to talk about, because it's a 15-minute talk, is how complex is your engine in your car? This really relates back to how many layered processes do you have? How complex is your engine? You can have yourself a really great, well-engineered, well-oiled machine like it shows on that side, but it's very complex. Or you can have a much more simplified thing that still achieves the same value. When you start to think about processes that happen in your environment, they get caked on over time. Bob adds something, George adds something, Sarah adds something, and then by the time we're done with that, we have Bob, George, and Sarah's version of how we're supposed to be doing this. Maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 50% of that has nothing to do with what we're trying to achieve through that process. So we need to start to simplify our processes. So what do we see? One is hard to replace, one's easy to replace. If things become hard to replace, it's very, very hard for us to deal with those processes and get rid of them. So, how do we simplify processes? Notice the word minimally viable product again, right? I remember years ago, I had this conversation with an application owner. They had this giant application, monolithic monstrosity that ran on Solaris. And this application did about 150 things. We got into a discussion about what was the requirement for this application, what was really needed for the application. And after we got done with that discussion, we realized that we actually didn't even need this thing. And we were talking about spending $14 million to replace it and re-platform it, because there was no business requirement for it anymore. The time and the use had long gone from it. Don't try to understand the current processes. In other words, don't spend your time understanding what Bob, George, and Sarah have caked on in the process. Just go figure out what the requirement for the process is and fulfill that. It's a lot easier to do that way. Understand the constraints that exist from the business. You have to do it on this platform. You have to do it this way. That stuff always exists. This is a big one for me. Does it really require human interaction? I know of a customer that I have that has a situation where they have to have 4 human approvals before a server is deployed. Now let's assume that they can chain those and the groups can get together and meet and they can do that, and they're going to do it quickly. It's still going to take a day. In their case, it takes 4 weeks before they can deploy a server. Think about that human interaction impact and how dangerous it is. And then most importantly, what is the value of the process to the business? That's the big one. I love this quote at the bottom, by the way. It's from a book. It's really great. It's the processes that are killing us. If you take a look at these three things, over-engineering is a big problem. Over-engineering processes will kill every business. All right, so the three things to consider. Do you have the right vehicle? Are you over-engineering your servers? Are you over-engineering your paths? Are you over-engineering your architecture, your infrastructure? Do you have the race car when you really just need a golf cart? Next item. Do you understand the journey ahead? Are you talking to the business? Do you understand what they're doing? Do you understand the roadmap that they have? And are you aligning with that so you can keep the velocity up in every turn that's going to come so you know the next turn after the first one? And are you able to simplify your engine? Think about your processes, cut them down to minimally viable. I've seen people take months off of their processes just by changing the human interaction aspect of the process. No technology at all. Sometimes you can save the most amount of time doing that. So this is a quote I heard the other day and I'm really attaching to. It's not going to be easier, but it's going to be better. And that's the outcome from this, is that it's not going to be easier, because you know what? It's not easier to talk to the business. It's not easier to go for the minimally viable product. It's a lot more fun to do the big monstrosity, because we're all engineers and we like to build that. And it is not easier to investigate your current processes and change them, but it is worth it at the end. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'll be available for any questions afterwards. Thanks for your time.